Amanda and Mark had different work hours. Mark was an IT manager and typically worked during the day from Monday to Friday. Amanda was an ICU nurse, working 3 night shifts each week from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Although the hospital made her work many holidays and weekends, she still managed to have a day off each week after accounting for her sleep schedule. Plus, she could easily pick up extra shifts when she wanted, which helped pay for vacations and special events, and her boss allowed her flexibility in her schedule. "Did you hear back from the new guy? What was his name again?" Mark asked. "Greg," Amanda replied. "Yes, he texted me this morning. Since you won't be home before I leave, I thought today would be a good day to meet him. He suggested we meet at the McDonald's off exit 8 on my way to work tonight. It's a public place, so we can chat and see if we get along." "That sounds like a good idea," Mark said. "So I guess this means you're finished with the other guy?" "James," Amanda said. "And yes, I'm done with him. It was fun for a while, but he's become too clingy these past weeks. When he mentioned having feelings for me, I decided it was best to end it. You know that." "I understand," Mark agreed. "You're right. There's no reason for anyone to get hurt. It's frustrating how some guys mess up a good time." Amanda laughed, then playfully said, "Are you blaming them for liking me?" Mark stammered, No, of course not. You're great, you know that. I just mean they get to enjoy things without commitment, so you'd think they'd be satisfied. But they want more and end up with nothing." She chuckled again. "I know what you mean, it's just fun to tease you a bit. Anyway, the bus will be here soon, so let me see the kids. I love you, and I'll talk to you later. If I don't hear from you before then, I'll call before I start my shift to share my impressions." To everyone else, the Greens seemed like a typical family. Mark was 30, Amanda was 28, and they had 2 kids, an 80-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son. The kids were busy with baseball and dance, and the parents managed the different activities, keeping everything organized. The Greens enjoyed family outings and vacations together. They also had special dates just for the 2 of them. To the outside world, they looked like a perfect American family. Most of their conservative friends and family would have been surprised to discover that they were not a completely ordinary family. Amanda had relationships with other men, and Mark knew about it and accepted it. This had been going on for over 2 years. Amanda and Mark had married young, and Amanda was not ready for such a big commitment. She grew up in a very strict household where even as an adult, her mother spoke about sensitive topics in whispers. Amanda learned to see intimacy as something bad and felt shame about her desires. Even though she and Mark had tried to discuss this, she still felt conflicted about it. A few years ago, Amanda acted out against her feelings and made a mistake. It lasted a couple of months, and during a minor argument, she broke down and shared everything with Mark. It wasn't about attraction. She wanted attention and validation, which led to choices she regretted. This event was hard on their marriage, but Mark loved Amanda and wanted to make things better. They talked openly and worked on their issues and seemed to make some progress together. So when Amanda made the same mistake again, Mark was heartbroken. It happened several more times. Though they weren't serious relationships, Amanda would get involved with other men, sometimes even in places where Mark was. She would cry and confess her actions, feeling truly sorry afterward. Yet no matter how sorry she was, it seemed inevitable that she would slip up again. Mark began to think that the only way forward might be separation. He loved his children and didn't want them to grow up in a broken home, but he struggled to trust Amanda after everything. Then, one day, he came up with a new idea. Mark told Amanda that he was open to changing their marriage rules as long as they could agree on certain boundaries to make it work. He allowed her to be with other men if she wanted, but he insisted that it had to be done openly and honestly. If she was going to meet other guys, she needed to tell Mark who they were and how long she would be away. If her plans changed, she had to let him know too. She needed to come home afterward and be fully present with him. It couldn't feel like a chore. She had to show genuine enthusiasm for their time together. She shouldn't do anything with other men that she wasn't willing to try with Mark. Transparency was a must. She was to share everything that happened, with no secrets about the men or their encounters. When possible, they should include each other. This meant that sometimes they would share experiences with other people together. Finally, Mark had the right to say no to any encounter or partner. Amanda agreed with tears in her eyes. thankful that her husband wanted to find a way through their challenges. The following weekend, while Mark played darts inside a bar, Amanda stepped outside and became intimate with the bouncer in his truck. The next night, they met up with another person for a shared experience. Inside, Mark was deeply troubled by the whole situation. It was hard for him to throw darts and keep his mind off what was happening outside. Seeing Amanda, who he cherished, with another man filled him with discomfort and unease. The thought of her being with others made him feel small and upset, but he knew that if he didn't agree to this, their marriage might end. He couldn't bear the thought of living with dishonesty and uncertainty. If he didn't open up their relationship, he'd have to end it completely, and he didn't want to be away from his kids. So Mark set aside his discomfort and tried to cope. After that first weekend, he found it really hard to keep going. The images and thoughts wouldn't leave his mind. In search of support, he started looking online for groups where men shared similar experiences. He was surprised to find that some men actually found joy in their wives being with others. To protect himself emotionally, Mark made a decision. He chose to focus on the experiences and see Amanda as someone who brought him excitement, finding ways to manage his feelings about it all. Mark found comfort in knowing that no matter what happened, Amanda always returned to him. Her heart was his alone. He also noticed that whenever she spent time with other men, their shared experiences led to better intimacy between them. Over time, Mark not only accepted but encouraged Amanda's connections with other men. It became a significant part of their relationship. Amanda's energy and mood changed positively when she was with others, and this benefited both of them. They grew closer over the 2 years of their open marriage. Amanda started to create her own set of guidelines. Most of the men she met were those who she and Mark approached together at a bar, or people she got to know online. If a man was disrespectful or pushy, she would not meet him again. After several unsatisfactory experiences, she decided to meet potential partners in public first. If they could have a good conversation and she felt good afterward, she would consider taking it further. Amanda always made it clear to these men that she was married and that their encounters were just for fun. She often mentioned Mark and stated that she was not looking for anything serious. After having a complicated situation before with a man who developed feelings, she learned to end things quickly if there was any hint of emotional attachment. Just a few days ago, she ended things with James, a college graduate she had been seeing for about 6 weeks. They enjoyed casual outings and good times together. However, when James shared that he was starting to have feelings for her, she decided to cut ties immediately. Mark was sure that Amanda would not reach out to him again. That was how their arrangement had to work. By 5:45, Mark had finished his work updates, meaning he would get home a bit earlier than expected, around 6:15. However, he wouldn't see Amanda before she had to leave for her shift. As an ICU nurse, she needed to arrive at least half an hour early to prepare for her duty. Amanda believed that being on time meant arriving early. Even though the hospital was only 30 minutes away, she insisted on leaving at least 45 minutes before her shift to avoid any rush. Mark usually got home from work around 5:30. This gave him a moment to kiss his wife, Amanda, goodbye and chat for a bit before she left for her shift. She was always on time. With Amanda, it was likely that she had met Greg, the new guy, at McDonald's around 5:15 or so. They would have a milkshake, talk for a bit, and then she'd go to work. If things went well, she might have someone new in her life. Mark decided not to interrupt her, so he got into his car, turned on the air conditioning, and drove home. At 6 o'clock, he sent a quick text. "Looks like you had to leave a little earlier than planned. Hope everything's going well," he wrote. After about 30 seconds, his phone buzzed with her reply. "Chatting. We'll call when I leave." "Okay," he replied. "Love you." Years of experience told him that Amanda should be finishing up soon. She wouldn't stay at McDonald's too long and would need to get to work on time. It seemed everything was going well. She had probably been there for a while. If Greg turned out to be unpleasant, she would have left by now, so this was a good sign. Mark actually liked that Amanda had a few regular friends to hang out with. Even though there was a chance of getting too attached, having familiar people made things easier. He could guess how long she would be gone and what mood she might be in when she returned, which helped him relax about a stranger being creepy. Amanda reminded the kids about the leftovers in the fridge and gave them hugs. Kelsey, she said to the neighbor girl, Mark should be here by 6:30, so you won't have to wait long. Kelsey looked up from her textbook and waved back. That's fine, Mrs. G. We know what to do. It was nice to have a responsible neighbor kid available on days like this when schedules didn't quite align. Having Kelsey next door was very convenient, and she was generally cheerful and easy to work with. Although she was only 14 and couldn't drive yet, she could just walk over. Amanda checked her phone. It was 10 minutes after 5 as she got into the Pathfinder. That would get her to McDonald's a little before 5:30, giving her enough time for a quick chat with Greg. She had seen his picture. He had close-cropped brown hair, a neatly trimmed beard, a strong jaw, and a solid build. She knew he was an ex-Marine and now worked in a warehouse, suggesting that he kept in shape. Amanda had never been particularly drawn to very muscular guys, but Greg was certainly nice to look at. As she drove, Amanda felt uneasy. She wished she could have made a better first impression than wearing scrubs covered in playful foxes against a lavender background. While fun, the scrubs didn't make her feel very attractive, especially with how they fit. Before meeting someone for the first time, Amanda usually felt nervous. Many men had told her she was attractive, yet she still worried about being good enough for whoever she was meeting. You might think that after being with a number of different guys, her confidence would be strong. Still, she often felt unsure of herself. Standing at 5 feet 7 inches, Amanda was a pretty woman. She had light brown hair that curled past her shoulders and bright blue eyes that could catch anyone's attention. She also had an athletic build and lovely curves. After their son turned 4, she decided to get cosmetic surgery, as breastfeeding had changed her body. Even though her husband Mark had encouraged her to embrace her natural beauty, he eventually supported her decision to enhance her confidence. Now he saw it as a positive choice. While she would openly acknowledge having a lift, she often downplayed the other changes, as it was one of the few things she treated herself to. Halfway to her exit, her phone buzzed. Amanda disliked texting while driving, but quickly glanced to see it was Greg. Got off work late? I'm home but can't shower yet. Would you mind coming here? I live about 10 minutes off the exit. Amanda felt uneasy. This wasn't what she had planned. She was not comfortable visiting a man's home when she had never met him before. It would also add extra time to her drive, and although she had left early, she wouldn't be able to chat for long. She typed a reply, trying not to let her annoyance show. What happened to meeting in public? You don't have to come inside. We can just talk in the driveway, he responded. I wouldn't be great company right now. Frustration bubbled inside her. Amanda had become pickier about the men she met, and Greg seemed like a good prospect. He might not have been the most talkative, but he held himself with a certain confidence that she found appealing. Plus, he had recent health check results, which certainly helped ease her mind. She thought that if she said no to this schedule change, she would probably have to start over again. From past experience, she knew that if you missed an opportunity to meet, most guys wouldn't reach out again. With a sigh, she typed her response. Okay, send me your address. I won't have long to talk as I have to go to work after. As the exit 1 mile sign appeared on the highway, her phone buzzed again. Great. I can take a quick shower and be ready for you. The address is 21315 Oak Crest Lane. There's a black Toyota in the garage. You can park behind it. See you soon. Amanda exhaled in frustration. She disliked last-minute changes and the uncertainty that came with them. The Pathfinder pulled into Greg's driveway at 5:36 p.m. The house looked small but well kept. The yard was neat and tidy. The garage was open as Greg had said it would be, so Amanda parked behind his black car. The house was on a decent piece of land, about half an acre, with a row of trees acting as a natural barrier between it and the next home. It was a nice neighborhood, with plenty of houses spaced comfortably apart. Amanda stepped out of the SUV and took out her phone, but before she could text or call Greg, the door opened and he walked outside with a wave. Hello there, he said as he approached. He had an unusual way of standing. Amanda wasn't sure if he wanted to shake hands or give her a hug. She thought a handshake felt a bit formal, so she stepped forward and gave the tall man a brief hug before stepping back to her car to feel a bit safer. Hello yourself, she replied. If Amanda had to choose a word to describe this new acquaintance, it would be imposing. His gaze was intense and focused. When he smiled, it didn't fully reach his eyes. He was much taller than her, standing at 6 feet 3 inches with broad shoulders and muscles visible under his shirt. She could smell a hint of cologne when she hugged him. "Thanks for coming by," he said. "I didn't want to seem too casual for you." His voice was deep but soft. There was something in his tone that made her feel he anticipated that she might have said no. He stepped back from the hug, giving her space. She appreciated this consideration, even though there was something in the way he looked at her that made Amanda feel a bit uneasy. "You look very nice, Amanda," he said, his tone calm. "I was worried your pictures might not show your true self, but they really don't do you justice. You look even nicer in person." Amanda felt herself blush and pointed to her outfit. "In scrubs?" she asked, unsure. "That feels like you're just being nice. Nobody looks good in scrubs." A small smile appeared on Greg's face. "You look good in them. I can't see everything, but I know there's more to you beneath those scrubs. I can't wait to see it." Amanda's eyes widened at how straightforward he was. Even though she knew she should feel uncomfortable, something about Greg made her pulse quicken. Other guys might have said such things and come off as odd, but Greg felt different. He spoke as if he were simply noting everyday things, rather than making bold comments right after meeting her. We'll see about that," she replied, feeling a bit unsure. To regain her footing, Amanda changed the topic to their jobs, families, and interests. While Greg wasn't very talkative, he answered all her questions and gave her room to share her thoughts. She discovered that he was single, never been married, and 32 years old. He had served 8 years in the Marines and chose not to re-enlist after his second tour. Greg had a sister who lived a couple of hours away, but no other family. Amanda shared pictures of her family, her husband, her kids, and how her marriage functioned. As they talked more about their hobbies, Amanda found herself relaxing against the front of her SUV. It felt easy to converse with Greg, almost like they were old friends. He seemed genuinely interested in her, making her feel valued. It also didn't help that he had a strong presence that often caught her off guard, making her focus more on his words. Suddenly, Amanda's phone buzzed. "Got to leave a bit earlier than planned. Didn't want to interrupt you," a message from Mark read. "I'm already partway home. Hope things are going well." "Oh no, it's already 6 o'clock. Quickly, Amanda typed a response. "Still chatting, we'll call when I leave." "Okay," came the reply. "Love you." She quickly put her phone back in her pocket. "Your husband checking in?" Greg asked, the hint of a smile still on his lips. "Yes," Amanda said, feeling a bit embarrassed. "He got to leave work early. He was just checking in, thinking I'd be gone by now." She frowned slightly. "Speaking of which, I really do need to go," she said finally. "I have to get to work, but it was lovely to meet you. I appreciate you keeping this first meeting public." Greg gave her one of his warm smiles. "I'm glad you came by." He took a small step towards her and opened his arms for another hug. Amanda didn't hesitate this time. She stepped into his strong embrace and allowed him to pull her closer. She felt aware of her feelings as they stood together. Greg gently squeezed Amanda and spoke softly in her ear. "I'm very glad to see you. You are such a lovely woman." Amanda felt her heart race as she started to step back from this stranger. What was she thinking? She had just met him. "There's one thing I need from you before you go," Greg said softly. "What's that?" Amanda asked, taking a small step back from his embrace. Greg had a hint of a smile on his lips, but his eyes were serious, showing he didn't want to be argued with. He looked deeply into Amanda's eyes, and she felt a shiver despite the warmth of the day. "I need you to help me with something," the big man stated calmly. Amanda's eyes widened in surprise. She looked up at Greg, expecting to see a smile or some sign that this was a joke, but his face was serious. She felt stunned, wondering how to respond. Surely this stranger didn't expect anything unreasonable. They were in a public place, and she didn't know him well. They had agreed this was just a quick meeting to see if they clicked. Plus, she needed to leave for work. Instead of responding, Amanda found herself feeling overwhelmed. She looked at Greg's face again, and now there was a smirk. He had noticed her reaction. Of course, she wasn't considering it. The idea was ridiculous. Why would she agree to something so out of the blue? It felt wrong and absurd, so why hadn't she turned away or laughed it off? "Think about it," he said softly. "You know you want to." "But I have to," she protested weakly. That's not true, he interrupted. No one is forcing you to stay. If you didn't want to, you'd have left by now. He smirked. You wouldn't keep looking at me. He watched her intently with a powerful expression on his face. You want to help me, he stated. So let's do this. Amanda felt her heart race, and she felt a little dizzy. It was as if she weren't fully in control of her actions as she found herself kneeling in front of him. In the quiet of the driveway, Greg stood confidently as Amanda hesitated, unsure of her next move. She glanced around nervously but remained focused on him. Despite feeling uneasy, Amanda couldn't shake the strange pull that seemed to draw her in. Kneeling on the hard concrete, she felt discomfort, but it hardly registered in her mind. The car in the driveway shielded her from view, though someone passing by might catch a glimpse if they looked closely. But none of that seemed important to her anymore. Her attention was fixed entirely on the situation unfolding in front of her. Greg gave her a reassuring look, his voice calm as he murmured, "That's good." He placed a hand on her head gently, not forcefully, and she found herself focusing entirely on pleasing him, craving approval. Normally, Amanda didn't like feeling controlled, but something about this moment was different. She put her best efforts into making Greg feel appreciated. Time passed, but she barely noticed. Greg gave her pauses, allowing her a break before continuing. Though she felt conflicted deep down, Amanda continued, driven by a strong urge to make him happy. As they continued, a car passed down the street, and Amanda briefly wondered if anyone saw them. But in that moment, she realized she didn't care. The world outside didn't matter at all. Amanda had always enjoyed being intimate, but right now, her focus was entirely on Greg. Nothing else seemed important. His words of encouragement felt like sparks of excitement running through her. As things built up, Greg's breathing became uneven. "I'm close," he said. "Get ready." Amanda nodded in reply and prepared herself. Suddenly, Greg reached his peak, and it felt overwhelming as the moment unfolded. She was surprised by the intensity of it all, and she felt a rush of emotions. Amanda often felt mixed feelings about intimacy. It could be thrilling when it happened, and she liked the idea of bringing pleasure to someone she cared about. She appreciated being considerate in her relationships, yet she preferred not feeling the messiness afterward. At that moment, she was taken aback by the unexpected sensations that washed over her. The situation ended, and Amanda found herself sitting down, feeling a wave of emotion mix with the lingering effects of the experience. Meanwhile, Mark had said goodbye to Kelsey, checked in with the kids, and warmed up some leftover pasta. He felt a little disappointed that Amanda hadn't called as promised, but he thought she might reach out once her shift started. Perhaps she was busy with family matters or chatting with her friend about her latest troubles. He was surprised when the phone rang at 6:40 and saw it was Amanda calling. "Hello?" he answered, his tone filled with concern. "Are you okay? Why are you calling now?" Amanda's voice sounded troubled and stressed. "I'm running late, babe. I'm driving now." Concern turned to worry. "Did something happen? Was there an accident?" Amanda sounded embarrassed. "No accident, baby. She sighed. "I'm late because I just left Greg's house." Mark was confused. "His house? What do you mean? I thought you were meeting him at McDonald's. What's going on?" "Baby, I'm sorry," Amanda said. "Greg texted me while I was on my way. He got off work late and asked if I could come to his house instead. He said we could just talk outside in the driveway. So I said yes." Mark took a deep breath. "Okay. You could have mentioned that before when you texted that you were chatting." "I know," Amanda replied. "When you texted me, I was getting ready to leave. I thought I would call and tell you then." Mark's voice was calm, and he chose his words carefully. "So why are you running so late? You should have been at the hospital almost 15 minutes ago. I don't think I've ever known you to be late for work." "I don't understand either, baby. I called work and said I had a flat tire. They believed me since I've never called in before," she told him. "But you didn't have a flat, did you?" Mark asked carefully. "Amanda, what happened?" In a shaky voice, she confessed. "I was leaving. I gave him a hug. Then he asked me to do something I shouldn't have. I don't know why I did it." "Wait," Mark said firmly. "You were just supposed to see if you got along. Instead, you went to his house and did something else." "Not exactly," Amanda explained. I did it right in the driveway. I don't know why. He asked me to, and I just did it. And now I feel awful." I got a bit of makeup messed up because of it. Mark felt annoyed, but also a little amused since Amanda usually tried to look her best. So my good wife is late to work because she had to hide something unusual that happened, and now she's missing makeup? He was sure Amanda could sense his feelings from his tone. Yes, she admitted, sounding embarrassed. Mark, I'm sorry, I didn't plan for it to happen. I just couldn't say no. He sighed. I'm not upset about what happened. You know that you're free to make your own choices. The main issue is that you didn't tell me your plans changed. But I didn't plan for this, she protested. Maybe so, Mark agreed. But you did change your plans when you went to his house. I should have known about that before you left. That's the deal, you know that. What if he had been more than just a creep? Amanda's voice was quiet as she agreed. You're right, I should have told you. I'm sorry for what happened. He stopped her. No, don't be sorry about that. If you wanted to, that's fine. Did you enjoy it? Her voice was soft. I felt good when he was with me, she admitted. Wow, Mark replied. That's surprising. And you did it right there in the driveway? I guess the only thing that really bothers me is that I can't be with you right now. I'm glad you had fun, though. But next time, I need to know what's happening, okay? Okay, she agreed. You're right. I guess there is some chemistry, huh? Mark asked, almost as if he didn't need to. Amanda laughed. I guess so. Just to be honest, he just texted and asked me to his house on Saturday night. Mark shook his head. Looks like you may have found someone new. Actually, Greg hadn't just invited her. He had made it clear that she was coming over at 8 p.m. and suggested that she dress nicely, as if he expected her to follow his request. But Amanda thought it was basically the same thing. Now, she had to get herself ready for work. Saturday evening came. Amanda had just finished preparing for her night out. She kissed the kids goodbye, telling them that she was going to meet a friend. Then she gave Mark a special kiss. Don't have too much fun without me, she teased her husband. I want you ready when I come back. Amanda felt nervous as she drove over. It was silly. She knew the guy liked her, but she wasn't sure what to expect. It still felt a bit unreal that she had been so open with a stranger. She stopped at a service station to use the bathroom and to pass a little time so she wouldn't arrive too early. She bought a pack of gum and chewed a stick to make sure her breath was fresh. Soon, she turned into his driveway. She sent Mark a message at 7:55. I'm here and going in, she typed. I'll let you know when I'm on my way home. Okay, he replied. Love you. Love you too, she wrote back, meaning it. Amanda wasn't sure why she felt this way, but Mark opening up their marriage had brought them closer. She smiled to herself as she walked up the drive. She planned to treat Mark especially well tonight as a thank you. Amanda walked through the door, feeling a bit nervous. Greg greeted her with a smile, though his eyes seemed more serious than his expression. He hugged her and invited her inside, offering her something to drink. She declined politely, and they exchanged small talk as he showed her around his clean and tidy house. However, the conversation soon faded, and an awkward silence settled over them as they moved into the living room. Sensing the tension, Greg turned to her and asked, Did you wear the matching outfit like I asked? His question caught her off guard. Amanda felt a bit embarrassed, but she nodded quietly. Good, he said with a slight grin. Let me see. Amanda hesitated, her nerves surprising her. Though she had been in similar situations before, something about Greg's directness made her feel shy. Slowly, she removed her shirt and shorts, revealing the outfit underneath. Greg's gaze moved over her and he smiled. You look great, he said, making eye contact. Better than I imagined. His words made her blush, but Amanda managed a soft reply. I'm glad you like it. Come here, he said, stepping closer. Amanda followed without a word. Greg gently ran his hand down her shoulder before resting it briefly on her, his touch light and casual. After a moment, he asked her to sit with him, and the two spent the next few moments quietly enjoying each other's company. They shared a quiet connection, the earlier awkwardness fading as they settled into the evening. Greg's tone remained calm, but there was a clear sense that he was content. The night continued quietly, the conversation light and the atmosphere relaxed, with both of them enjoying the moment. Greg stood calmly as Amanda knelt before him, her movements slow and thoughtful. She couldn't fully understand why she felt so eager to please this man, who seemed to command her without words. Amanda usually liked having control, but now she found herself following Greg's lead without hesitation. It felt strange, yet she didn't resist the feeling. After a few moments, Greg gently pulled her up from the floor, a small smile on his face. He looked at her closely, his eyes filled with curiosity. His hand rested softly on her shoulder as he helped her to her feet, creating a quiet, shared moment between them. Amanda blushed, feeling self-conscious but unable to deny the growing connection between them. Greg complimented her softly, and though she was embarrassed, she appreciated the kind words. His tone wasn't forceful, it was calm, almost admiring, as they continued to interact quietly in the room. He reached out, his touch gentle, and Amanda allowed him to lead her to the couch. The atmosphere was calm, and she felt surprisingly at ease, though her heart raced with nervous excitement. When she sat down, Greg remained standing, still watching her closely, his expression thoughtful. They shared a quiet moment, each seemingly deep in thought. The tension of the room began to lift as the two settled into the evening, both content to enjoy the peaceful atmosphere around them. The awkwardness of earlier had melted away, leaving behind a subtle, growing understanding between them. Greg paused, looking confused. "What is this?" he asked, as he carefully pulled something out that felt unusual. He held up a small, flexible ring. Sarah chuckled lightly. "That's my birth control ring," she explained. Greg nodded in understanding, though he seemed a bit unsure. "I've heard of it, but it feels strange. I don't want to get caught on it. Can you take it out for now?" Sarah, a little embarrassed, agreed and set the ring aside. "It releases hormones, so as long as I put it back in soon, it's fine. My husband never notices it, but I'll take it out if it makes things easier." Greg smiled. "Thanks," he said with a nod. They continued quietly, focusing on their time together. Greg made sure everything felt comfortable, and they both enjoyed the relaxed atmosphere. As the night went on, they found a rhythm, sharing a quiet and intimate connection without any pressure or hurry. At some point, they shifted positions, and Greg carefully moved Sarah onto the couch. The cushions were a bit awkward, but they both adjusted, focusing on enjoying the moment. The mood remained calm and peaceful as they spent time together, talking and relaxing, the earlier tension fading into the background. The night continued in a quiet, thoughtful way, both of them feeling content in each other's company, letting the evening unfold naturally. Amanda found herself caught in the moment, unable to think of anything but the situation she was in. She could hear Greg speaking softly into her ear, encouraging her. The words sent a strange, electric feeling through her, but she remained focused on the experience, letting herself get lost in it. Without even realizing it, her body responded in ways she hadn't expected. Waves of emotion washed over her, leaving her in a daze, completely absorbed in the experience. The moment seemed endless, but she let herself drift through it, feeling lighter and lighter as it went on. Suddenly, everything stopped, and Greg pulled away. Amanda, still breathing heavily, felt the abrupt end but didn't protest. She was left catching her breath, her mind slowly returning to reality. Later that evening, back at home, things felt different between Amanda and her husband, Mark. She entered their room with a new sense of energy, and Mark noticed right away. The two of them shared a quiet connection, and when they kissed, it was filled with a deeper intensity. There was no need for words at first. They simply fell into a rhythm with each other. Amanda felt a little sore from earlier in the day, but she didn't let it affect her. When Mark paused, concerned, she smiled softly, reassuring him that everything was fine. "I'm just a bit sore from the way I was sitting earlier," she explained, referring to the uncomfortable position on Greg's couch. Mark understood and kissed her again, and the two continued to share a quiet and intimate moment. As they moved together, he asked her gently, "Was it good?" Amanda smiled and whispered back, "Yes, it was." The two remained close, enjoying the comfort and warmth of their time together, feeling more connected than ever. He hoped the answer would be yes. Why be with others if it wasn't going to be enjoyable? "Oh, honey, you have no idea," she said with a smile. "I felt things I couldn't even control." She looked into her husband's eyes, her blue eyes sparkling. I had fun with that other man, but I'm still yours. Make me yours, she encouraged him. Mark had anxiously waited for his wife's return. The moment he was with her, he could hardly hold back. Her words motivated him, and soon he was lost in the moment. As he held her close, she wrapped her legs around him and gently ran her fingers through his hair, whispering sweet words in his ear. A smile crossed her face as she remembered the ring she put back on before leaving. In the days that followed, their conversations often turned to Amanda's time with Greg. She was careful to be honest with Mark, sharing every detail. Mark felt a bit uneasy about how easily Amanda seemed to follow the stranger's lead. She had always been strong-willed and hard to persuade. He had tried to suggest some intimate moments in public before, but she had always said no. Yet with Greg, she had gone along with things and even been late for work. Amanda had never been shy about her comfort. She spoke up if something was wrong. But after her time with Greg, her body felt different, almost worn out. It seemed like Greg had some kind of hold over her, and she didn't even think of resisting. This sometimes made Mark feel uneasy, as if he was losing control. Still, he didn't really want to change things because Amanda seemed happier than ever. It was clear that something had changed in their lives. She seemed energized, and they were connecting more often, even with her busy work schedule. When Amanda's next day off arrived, she received a text from Greg around lunchtime. "Meet me at work this evening. I will take a break at 7:30. Drive into the parking lot, then turn right. I'll be waiting by the fence. Wear something nice. Address is 31800 East Ridge Road." Amanda felt confused. She was annoyed at his confidence and how he assumed she would just come, but she also realized that his message had made her feel a bit excited. With a start, she noticed that she was already thinking about what to wear. What was happening to her? Instead of replying to Greg, Amanda decided to text her husband. "Greg wants me to meet him at his work tonight in the parking lot," she wrote. After a moment, Mark replied, "What does he want?" Amanda rolled her eyes. Surely Mark should have understood. "He didn't say, but he asked me to wear something nice." "So what time are you leaving? How long will you be gone?" Mark texted back. Amanda shook her head. This was bizarre. This guy expected her to just come, and it seemed like Mark thought the same. Still, it felt like she would have to do what Greg asked. "He wants me there at 7:30, she typed. "It's his break, so it won't take long." "I should get to see you before you go," Mark replied. "I guess so," Amanda texted back. "Cool. Maybe wear the blue set with the flowers? Love you," Mark suggested. Great. If Amanda had hoped for a reason to change her mind, that hadn't come. It looked like she would be meeting Greg tonight. She began to compose a message for him. Amanda parked her car in the large warehouse lot at 7:20. She followed Greg's directions, turning right after entering the gate and driving to the end of the row. Spotting his black Toyota, she parked next to it and waited. The warehouse was just off a smaller road, with a chain-link fence covered in vines providing some privacy. The large lot had many cars, even at this hour. Thankfully, the evening shift had just started, so it was unlikely anyone would walk by her car. Still, it wasn't impossible. Amanda glanced at her phone, wishing the time would pass faster. This was so strange. She never did anything like this. But here she was, coming to meet a guy she hardly knew at his job. She shifted in her seat, realizing that even though she was nervous, she was also feeling a bit excited about the whole situation. The blue flowery outfit she had chosen was already making her feel a little warm, even though she'd put it on just before leaving home. Amanda had never understood why this sort of thing appealed to her now when it used to make her uncomfortable. Lost in thought, a sudden knock on the window startled her. She turned to see Greg's intense gaze as he grinned at her. He opened the passenger door and climbed in casually. "I'm surprised I caught you off guard," he said, settling into the seat. "I wasn't trying to be sneaky." Amanda blushed slightly and shook her head. "Sorry, I was just thinking about something." "What about?" he asked with a playful smirk. His cocky attitude irritated her for a moment, and she started to respond. "Look, Greg, But before she could finish, he interrupted. "Did you wear what I asked? Come on, let me see," he teased with a grin. For a brief moment, Amanda hesitated. She thought about telling him off, asking him to leave and driving away, but his eyes, intense and unwavering, made her pause. Before she knew it, she lifted her shirt, showing the blue satin underneath. "Nice choice," he murmured, clearly pleased. "Do the bottoms match?" Instead of answering, Amanda unbuttoned her shorts, revealing the top of her matching blue underwear. "Very nice," Greg said approvingly. He glanced at his watch and sighed. "I don't have much time, though. My break's almost over. Come here for a minute." Although his request was blunt, Amanda found herself moving without protest. She didn't understand why, but something about his presence made her comply. The moment passed in silence as Amanda leaned over the console between the seats. Time seemed to blur, and Greg's voice was the only thing grounding her. "Good girl," he murmured quietly, his tone appreciative. The interaction was quick, and as Greg prepared to leave, Amanda sat back, taking a deep breath. She couldn't explain why she had acted the way she did, but something about the situation had drawn her in, leaving her thoughtful and quiet as he climbed out of the car. For some reason, the situation stirred something in Amanda, making her feel increasingly tense and on edge, but not in an uncomfortable way. Her emotions were running high, yet she couldn't fully explain why. After a few moments, Greg took hold of her face, his hands firm, and continued his actions, though Amanda felt conflicted. Part of her mind resisted the way he treated her, but another part of her couldn't deny the intensity of the moment. She felt a surge of emotions and a strange excitement building within her. Greg grunted, signaling he was close to finishing. Amanda braced herself, knowing how much she had always liked the feeling of closeness in moments like these. It was something she and her husband Mark had experienced together, and now it was happening again in a different way. Suddenly, Greg tightened his grip, and Amanda focused on staying calm as he finished. The moment passed quickly, and Greg eventually eased his movements, allowing Amanda a moment to catch her breath. His voice was low, muttering something as the tension eased. Amanda felt a wave of emotion, though she couldn't quite place it. As time went on, Amanda and Greg settled into a pattern. Greg would reach out to Amanda once or twice a week, letting her know when they would meet. Their interactions became somewhat routine, often happening at Greg's house or other places when they had time. Despite the unusual arrangement, Greg was respectful of her schedule, never interfering with her family plans or commitments with Mark. Over time, it became part of Amanda's life, though she tried to keep everything balanced and discreet. Greg was clear when he suggested a time to meet. He expected Amanda to show up without question. Their arrangement mostly revolved around their time together, with Greg often focusing on his own wants. Despite this, Amanda never felt mistreated. She found their interactions satisfying and always left with a sense of fulfillment. Over time, she even found herself more drawn to his strong, confident personality. It brought out a side of her she hadn't been aware of before. She followed most of Greg's requests without hesitation, almost instinctively. The more they spent time together, the more comfortable she became, and they began talking between their meetings. Amanda shared details about her life, her family, and her work, while Greg was more reserved, though he eventually opened up bit by bit. She learned that he led a simple life working, focusing on his hobbies, and not actively dating. Greg seemed content with their arrangement as a way to relieve stress and tension. Even with these conversations, the main focus of their meetings remained the same. Amanda had always found certain activities uncomfortable, so she reserved them for rare moments. With her husband, Mark, she often avoided them because it was physically uncomfortable for her, though she knew he wished for more of those moments. With Greg, however, things were different. He was more casual about it, and somehow, it didn't hurt like it usually did. Although it didn't technically break any agreements she had with Mark, Amanda still felt conflicted, knowing she didn't engage in those activities as much with her husband. To ease her conscience, she began offering it more often to Mark, who welcomed the change. Though it never became Amanda's favorite, something unexpected began to happen. During one of her meetings with Greg, the usual routine felt different. He adjusted slightly, and Amanda was surprised by a powerful sensation that built up and led to an overwhelming release. It was a moment she hadn't anticipated, unlocking something new for her that she hadn't experienced before. Over time, Amanda noticed an unexpected response in her body, one she had never experienced before. The pressure she had felt released in an intense way, leaving her surprised and unsure of what had just happened. Later that night, when Amanda told her husband Mark about the experience, he was both intrigued and a little envious. Despite the unusual situation, Amanda reassured him that it was simply a combination of technique and the moment itself. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that part of her reaction was due to Greg's strong, confident nature, which brought out something new in her. As months passed, Amanda found herself focusing solely on Greg when it came to her encounters outside of her marriage. Although she and Mark had occasionally invited others into their relationship before, Greg fulfilled her needs so completely that she no longer felt the urge to seek anyone else. Greg, while never explicitly asking for exclusivity, seemed to appreciate this, and it was clear he wasn't interested in seeing other people either. Despite this, there was one thing that hadn't worked out: a threesome with Greg. Amanda had brought it up, and while Greg had been open to the idea, their schedules never aligned when Amanda and Mark tried to arrange it. The couple only made a few attempts, but it was a key part of their understanding. Any outside relationship had to be open to including both of them. This left Mark feeling slightly uneasy, even though the overall situation was going well. And it truly was. Since Amanda had started seeing Greg, her mood had improved, and she seemed much more open to intimacy with Mark. Their relationship had benefited from her increased energy and enthusiasm, and their connection was stronger than ever. Mark couldn't deny that their personal life had become more exciting and frequent, leaving little room for complaints. Amanda assured Mark that she would prioritize making a meeting with Greg happen, and Mark agreed to be patient. He didn't want to disrupt the good thing they had going, so he decided to give her time to work things out. What had really changed in Amanda, though, was her sense of openness and willingness to explore more within her relationship with Mark. Much of this newfound attitude came from her time with Greg. Greg never asked for anything. Instead, he confidently expressed what he wanted, and Amanda found herself going along with it without hesitation. This shift in dynamic allowed Amanda to be more accommodating and adventurous with Mark as well, which further strengthened their bond. Greg was always careful to respect Amanda's boundaries. For example, after the first time, he never tried anything she had clearly asked him not to do again. Still, he often treated her as if she existed solely to meet his needs. And strangely, Amanda found herself going along with it more often than not. Amanda was aware that Greg dictated most of their encounters, but she made sure not to let that affect her relationship with Mark. She cared deeply for her husband and didn't want to deny him anything he desired. However, their dynamic was different. With Greg, there was a certain intensity and energy that didn't exist in her marriage. While Mark would sometimes try to take charge, he didn't have the same imposing presence or personality that Greg had. Amanda never said no to Mark, but his attempts to be dominant didn't resonate with her in the same way. Mark was kind and loving. He cherished Amanda and would never ask her to do anything she didn't enjoy. He always put her comfort first. Greg, on the other hand, acted impulsively. Whatever came to his mind, he'd either do or ask her to do. He often switched things up suddenly during their time together, moving from one thing to the next without much thought. While this might have frustrated someone else, Amanda found herself surprisingly going along with his whims. But then, something changed. One weekend, Amanda went to see Greg as usual. The evening started like many others, with Greg taking the lead. After a while, he had her on the couch, and Amanda, as always, didn't protest. She was used to letting him take control, trusting that things would go as they usually did. At one point, Greg changed positions again, and though Amanda was uncomfortable, she didn't say anything. His usual carefree nature had her bending to his every request. But that night, something wasn't right. Amanda began to feel unwell, and the usual energy between them felt off. She realized that maybe she had pushed herself too far, and the carefree attitude she usually carried had caught up with her. What started as a typical evening left her feeling drained and unwell, something she hadn't expected. As a nurse, Amanda knew this was not a good idea, but she felt unable to say anything. It wasn't until later, after she had cleaned herself up and realized how uncomfortable she felt, that she mentioned to Greg that certain actions could lead to health issues. Greg simply mumbled that he hadn't thought about it, and Amanda hoped everything would be fine. Sadly, that's not what happened. By Monday night, Amanda was feeling very unwell. She had to work on Tuesday and Wednesday, so she called her doctor for an appointment, but he couldn't see her until Friday. In the meantime, she drank lots of water to manage her condition. On her way to work on Tuesday, she stopped to buy cranberry juice, hoping it would help until her appointment. She had handled these issues before, but this time it seemed to be getting worse. Amanda was exhausted when she got home from work on Thursday morning. She sent Mark a message saying she had a fever and was taking some medicine to feel better. He could tell she was in rough shape as she struggled to stay awake that evening. Usually, Amanda at least tried to watch some TV with him and the kids after her first day off. After midnight, Mark woke up to find Amanda's fever had climbed to 1 degrees. Worried about her health, he helped her to the bathroom for a lukewarm bath to cool her down. He gave her medicine for the fever, but firmly told her they might need to go to the emergency room if the bath didn't help, which she wanted to avoid. Mark comforted her as she cried in the tub. To her, the water felt icy against her heated skin. He suggested going to the hospital, but Amanda pleaded to wait just until they could see her doctor the next morning. Thankfully, the bath and medicine lowered her temperature to 102. 5 degrees, still high, but not immediately dangerous. Mark spent a restless night, setting alarms to check on her every hour. The next morning, Mark took off work to drive Amanda to the doctor since she was too weak to drive herself. The doctor quickly noticed her pale face and ordered some blood tests after checking her vitals. The urine test confirmed she had a serious infection. The doctor ordered a CT scan of Amanda's abdomen and later returned with some news. "You have pyelonephritis, a serious infection in your kidneys, caused by your severe UTI," he explained. "There's a high level of E. coli, which is making you feel so unwell." Looking over his glasses at Amanda, he added, "As a nurse, you know there shouldn't be any E. coli in that area. Given your knowledge and background, I assume hygiene isn't the problem, which means the bacteria likely came from another source." Amanda seemed ready to argue, but he raised a hand to pause her. "I'm not judging you, Amanda. Just be more careful. Pyelonephritis is serious. You could lose a kidney. You need to be treated for at least 1 night with IV antibiotics. This infection is strong." Amanda pushed back, hoping to avoid a hospital stay. She eventually persuaded the doctor to set up an IV bag in his office. He hesitated, but out of respect, agreed. After hours of observation, he let her go, but only after ensuring her condition had improved and she promised to take her antibiotics exactly as prescribed. He also warned her to go to the emergency room if her fever rose above 103 degrees F, reminding her again that she needed to follow his instructions carefully. Mark was supportive and took care of Amanda with kindness and concern. However, when it became clear that the treatment was working on Saturday night, he grew more serious. "Amanda," he said, "this can't happen again. I don't know what influence this person has over you, but you can't just agree to everything he suggests. You are much smarter than this. You could have been in real danger." "You're right, but—" She attempted to respond, but he cut her off. "No, not today," he said firmly. "This must not happen again. I'll text Greg and explain everything clearly. If he doesn't accept that, I may have to take stronger action." Amanda sighed. "Okay, I'm sorry, you're right," she agreed. So Mark sent the message, detailing the situation and making sure Greg understood that it should not happen again. He was surprised when he received a prompt reply and the tone was unexpected. "Hey, Mark, thanks for informing me," the text read. "I'm really glad she's feeling better. I'm truly sorry. I would never want to do anything to harm Amanda. Sometimes I get carried away and don't think things through. I hope you understand that I never wanted to hurt her. I'll be more careful moving forward." Mark was pleased with this reply. He decided to be direct while he had the chance. He looked at Amanda. "I want you to bring up the idea of a threesome again. You've never been with a guy for this long who I haven't met or spent time with. If he wants to keep seeing you, he needs to agree to this. I have been patient, but he made a big mistake and needs to show he's serious." Amanda nodded. This was a fair request from her husband. It seemed that Greg understood too, as he quickly agreed to join in as soon as Amanda was ready. It took Amanda a few days to feel more like herself. Her first few days back at work were tougher than usual. Greg waited a week and a half before he reached out to set up a meeting. When he did, he surprisingly asked her to come over instead of telling her to come. When she arrived, he was more considerate of her feelings than he had been before. While it was nice to see that he cared, the whole situation felt a bit strange. As things progressed, Amanda felt a mix of emotions. She wanted to make sure she wasn't harmed, but the way Greg took charge felt familiar and comforting to her. To her credit, Amanda didn't leave until she had a clear plan for a threesome with Greg and Mark set for the following Saturday. Those 2 weeks went by fast. Amanda took on a few extra shifts to save up some vacation money. While the extra cash was great, it left her feeling tired until she could catch up on her sleep. The kids each went to have a sleepover, which Mark managed beautifully. Before they knew it, Saturday had arrived. Soon they were saying goodbye to the kids at Grandma's house and heading out for a meal. After that, they planned to go to Greg's to finally make the threesome happen. Amanda tried to stay calm on the outside, but she was pretty nervous inside. She wondered how Mark would react to seeing her and Greg together. This was different from their usual encounters. She had never been with a guy where their relationship roles were so clear. She worried Mark might feel jealous or hurt by how she acted. She did her best to prepare Mark for what to expect with Greg, not wanting him to be surprised if he saw a side of her that was new. Mark smiled at her. "Sweetheart, I understand that things are a bit different between the two of you," he said to her. "As long as I know you're coming home with me, I'm not worried about it," Mark said with a reassuring smile. Amanda nodded, though she felt a little uneasy. She loved Mark deeply, and she hoped he wouldn't misinterpret the connection she shared with Greg. She didn't want any misunderstandings, and hopefully there wouldn't be any problems. The Greens arrived at Greg's house just before 9 p.m., both feeling nervous. Mark made a mental note that if they ever found themselves in a similar situation again, he'd insist on setting clearer boundaries earlier on. Greg welcomed them warmly, shaking Mark's hand firmly and hugging Amanda. He gave them a quick tour of the house, with Mark smirking as he saw the infamous couch Amanda had mentioned. But there was no time for awkwardness. Soon they found themselves in Greg's bedroom. Sensing the tension, Greg took charge. "Mark, do you want to start?" he asked politely. "After all, Amanda is your wife." Mark smiled, feeling a bit out of place. "If it's all right, I'd like to watch for a bit first," he replied, hoping to ease the tension. Greg shrugged and turned to Amanda. "All right then," he said. "Come here." Amanda glanced briefly at Mark before turning back to Greg. Without hesitation, she followed Greg's lead. Mark noticed how quickly she responded, how calm and composed she seemed. He watched, feeling a mix of emotions as Amanda focused on Greg, their interactions flowing naturally. After a few minutes, Greg shifted his attention and asked Amanda to move to the bed. Without delay, she followed his instructions. Greg remained in control of the situation, but Amanda seemed comfortable, making Mark realize this was something she had accepted fully. Mark watched as Greg interacted with Amanda, noticing how at ease she was. While he had expected some hesitation, there was none. Instead, Amanda seemed to be in sync with the moment, and for the first time, Mark began to understand that the dynamic between them was different, but not something to fear. Mark remained a quiet observer, realizing that despite the initial awkwardness, this was something they had agreed to, and he felt a strange sense of calm as they all adjusted to the situation. If Amanda ever engaged in personal moments, it was something she kept very private. On the rare occasion she had done it in front of Mark, it was with hesitation. So when she reached down without a second thought, exposing herself and beginning to touch herself with such intensity, Mark was taken aback. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. To his surprise, it didn't take long for her to respond. Greg, encouraging her calmly, kept up his pace, and within minutes, Amanda reached a point of release. Her reaction seemed to last longer than usual, with Greg gently praising her the whole time, which only seemed to extend her response. After giving Amanda a moment to catch her breath, Greg prepared to continue. With steady movements, he positioned himself, and Amanda responded, her body welcoming the motion. Greg paused for a moment, sharing a glance with Mark, before continuing. Amanda, clearly engaged, didn't hesitate to follow his lead. Greg, maintaining control, kept the rhythm steady, his tone encouraging as Amanda responded to him. Mark, observing, was struck by how easily Amanda seemed to be caught up in the moment, something he had rarely seen before. What surprised him even more was how she seemed to experience wave after wave of release. a pattern that Mark wasn't accustomed to witnessing. As Greg continued, Mark could see Amanda becoming more and more involved in the experience, her reactions building as Greg kept speaking to her in low tones. Amanda's responses were intense, and Mark couldn't help but feel torn. On one hand, witnessing his wife in this state was incredible. On the other, it was an entirely new side of her that he had never seen before. The emotions were complex, and Mark found himself unsure of what to think. Seeing Amanda like this, so responsive and free, left Mark both amazed and conflicted. It was a moment that stirred feelings he hadn't expected, leaving him deep in thought as he processed what was happening. Mark's feelings were conflicted. On one hand, he loved Amanda deeply and wanted her to be happy. On the other hand, he felt a pang of discomfort, realizing that he had never seen her react this way before. It was a strange mix of emotions, but he couldn't bring himself to stop it, knowing how much joy it seemed to bring her. Sensing a shift, Greg decided it was time to change the pace. "Why don't you go over to Mark?" he suggested, stepping back. Amanda walked over to Mark, kissed him softly, and gently guided him down onto the carpet. She straddled him with a smile, positioning herself before slowly lowering onto him. Mark felt a surge of pleasure, and Amanda teased him. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "Yeah," Mark breathed, clearly caught up in the moment. He glanced at Greg, who was watching them, his expression calm. "It's just a lot to take in," Mark added. "Are you okay?" Amanda asked, noticing his unease. Mark quickly reassured her. "I'm fine, it's just new, that's all." Amanda smiled and continued, her movements confident as she focused on him. After a few moments, she shifted, and Mark opened his eyes to see Greg behind her, lightly resting his hands on her shoulders. They shared a brief moment of understanding before Greg gently stepped away. For a moment, Mark felt a bit unsure as Greg applied some lotion, massaging it gently as he worked with care. Amanda remained focused, her expression showing both concentration and comfort. Mark could sense her relaxation, which helped ease his own uncertainty. Greg leaned over, his attention still on Amanda, and she took a deep breath as the situation unfolded. Mark could see that Amanda was experiencing something intense but also comforting, as the moment seemed to pass with mutual understanding. Both men gave Amanda the space she needed, allowing her to be at ease. The situation, while unfamiliar, was handled with care and respect, leaving everyone in the room feeling grounded. Suddenly, Amanda's body reacted in an intense way. As Greg continued, Mark could feel the pressure increase, tightening around him. Amanda let out a sound that was a mix of surprise and intensity, overwhelmed by the moment. "So much! It's so intense!" she gasped, almost out of breath. Mark noticed the expression on her face, a mix of concentration and emotion. Just as he began to ask if she was okay, Amanda's body responded, leaving her visibly affected by the intensity of the experience. Greg, noticing her reaction, spoke softly. "You're doing great, Amanda." Encouraging her with a calm tone, the atmosphere remained focused and grounded. Amanda's reaction showed how deeply she was caught up in the moment, and her emotions seemed to flow as she tried to find her rhythm. Mark and Greg both adjusted to make sure she was comfortable. Mark could sense Amanda's responses growing stronger, her breathing quicker, but the mood remained respectful and caring. Mark, overwhelmed by the experience, finally felt the moment approaching for him as well. "I'm close," he said, his voice filled with emotion. The situation had been more intense than anything he had ever imagined, and he was reaching his limit. Greg gave a reassuring smile, but then stepped back to give Mark some space. As the situation progressed, Mark noticed Greg preparing to continue without giving things a break. Realizing this could be risky, Mark quickly stepped in, reminding Greg of the need to be careful. "We talked about this, Greg," he said firmly. "It's important to stay mindful." Greg immediately stopped, apologizing sincerely. "You're right, I wasn't thinking," he admitted, heading to the bathroom to clean up. As they took a moment to recover, Amanda looked at Mark and shrugged lightly, acknowledging the situation. "He gets a bit carried away sometimes," she said softly. When Greg returned, he was more mindful, and Mark took the opportunity to speak firmly but calmly. "We need to be careful, for everyone's safety," he reminded them both. Greg nodded in agreement, acknowledging the importance of keeping things respectful and ensuring everyone felt safe and comfortable. The atmosphere returned to a more grounded and thoughtful space as they wrapped up the evening with a mutual understanding. I used to be a difficult person, and I just was again. I realize now that I need to be more careful and not get so caught up in the moment. Feeling a bit better, Mark nodded and stepped back to let the others continue. Greg had Amanda lie back on the bed and began kissing her again. This went on for a while before he relaxed and had Amanda kiss him. She seemed to enjoy it a lot. When he moved away, she began to show attention to him in ways that made Mark think of their own moments together. Soon, Greg held Amanda's hair and seemed very pleased. Mark could hear Amanda making happy sounds, which made him feel mixed emotions. As they settled down and chatted about unimportant things, they suddenly heard the front door slam. "Greg?" called a woman from the living room. "What the heck?" Greg said loudly. "Becca? Wait a minute. I have friends here." Mark looked at Greg, puzzled. "It's my sister," Greg explained. "I didn't know she was going to come here tonight. She usually stays somewhere else when she's in town. Just a sec. Let me talk to her." But Amanda quickly got up and started putting on her clothes. "No," she said. "I don't want to make her leave, but I can't relax and keep this up knowing she's here." She laughed lightly. "Well, this was fun. Maybe we can try again soon?" That seemed reasonable, so they all got ready. Greg handled the situation, and Mark and Amanda stepped outside, feeling a bit like young people sneaking around as they walked into the night. The next few days in the greenhouse were quite unusual. On one hand, Mark was glad to see that there weren't any deep feelings involved. Amanda showed no signs of worry, and it was clear that she and Greg were just having fun. Initially, Mark had feared that Greg had some kind of hold over Amanda, especially since she seemed to do everything he wanted. But after seeing the two of them together, Mark felt reassured. There were no special looks or touches. He could tell Amanda didn't have any feelings for Greg beyond friendship. However, it was still really hard for Mark to watch his wife enjoy herself with another man. She seemed willing to do anything for Greg, even when it involved things she had previously resisted. And the way Amanda reacted, how easily she felt pleasure, and how often it happened was a lot for Mark to take in. To her credit, Amanda saw how hard this was for him. She offered to stop seeing Greg right away to end things completely, but Mark didn't want that. He wanted Amanda to be happy and fulfilled, even if he couldn't get the same results from her that Greg could. Besides, their relationship had never been better. He didn't want to change anything and risk losing what they had built. After much discussion and sharing their thoughts, they decided to continue as they were. Mark sent Greg a message, reminding him about being careful, and asked Amanda to firmly say no if Greg tried to push boundaries again. For 2 months, everything went smoothly. The first issue arose when Amanda had to work on the day of her annual checkup. She called the doctor to inform them, but rescheduling was difficult. The doctor was going on vacation soon, and the clinic was short-staffed, so appointments were hard to come by. This was frustrating because Amanda needed a new prescription, but the doctor would not give one without an exam. It left them with few options. They decided to rely on the method of withdrawal since Amanda had a slight allergy to latex, and Mark wanted to avoid condoms. But that meant considering Greg. Amanda felt confident it wouldn't be a problem. In all the times with Greg, he had only come inside her a few times. Mostly, he preferred other ways. Still, it was a topic worth discussing, and Mark was a bit worried. When Amanda talked to Greg about needing to be cautious, he just laughed. "Don't worry," he said. "I prefer it the other way anyway, and I don't want kids. This doesn't change much for me, but I'll be careful." When Amanda shared this with Mark, he felt much better. Greg had been true to his word since their agreement. In fact, he had started pausing awkwardly if he needed to withdraw before finishing, and he would clean up before continuing. Mark was relieved to not have to worry about that anymore. Another challenge came when Amanda had to adjust to her monthly cycle. She had been using her ring every 3 weeks, which had kept her from having a period at all. Now she had to think about how this affected their intimacy, as she wasn't a fan of the mess that came with being on her period. It wasn't long before she faced a decision. While she was on her first period after stopping the birth control, Greg had texted her to come over. At first, she said no, but he insisted, saying she could still be intimate without any mess. With anyone else, even her husband, Amanda, would have been upset. But with Greg, she found herself going to his house and being intimate with him twice that night. Surprisingly, it made her feel good to help him find pleasure, and she almost looked forward to doing it again the next month. Soon, they all adjusted to this new routine. Sometimes, Mark liked to tease Amanda and asked her to express her wishes when they were intimate. However, she did not seem interested in that kind of talk. So he learned to keep those thoughts to himself. He didn't actually want to risk starting a family again. It was nice that their kids were old enough to stay at friends' houses and entertain themselves at home. It was just playful conversation, but Amanda was never one for that. Overall, life was good. Their connection was strong, and the Greens were getting along well. There seemed to be no end in sight for this happy time in their marriage. So, if you're heading to the Walker site first thing in the morning, you could stop by the house and see me for a few minutes before I go to sleep. Your boss won't know, Amanda told Mark on the phone. The plan was smart. Driving to the Walker site meant Mark would pass the exit for their house. Amanda would be home by 8 in the morning. If he went to work a bit early and stopped by after his first task, he could see her for a quick moment before she fell asleep after her shift. Mark was a bit surprised that Amanda was willing to lose some sleep. This was her third shift in a row, and she had to pick up a fourth this week. Normally, she would want to rest after a long stretch like that, but she seemed energized and eager. Being off birth control seemed to have really boosted her interest in intimacy. She was noticeably more enthusiastic after stopping the ring. Of course, Mark wasn't going to complain, so they made their plans. Just as he was leaving work the next morning, the same time Amanda would be finishing her shift, his phone rang with her name on the screen. "Hey, babe," she said, sounding tired. "What's up?" he asked. "Are you still wanting me to meet you at home?" "About that?" she hesitated. "Greg reached out. He asked me to come by his place this morning. I won't go if you don't want me to, but..." Mark sighed. He couldn't deny feeling a bit disappointed that she was even considering spending time with Greg instead of him. "So what's the plan?" he asked. "I guess I'll see you tonight." "Oh no, I still want to see you this morning," Amanda quickly replied. "I was just thinking I could stop by his place for a bit and then come home. You could swing by after your stop at Walker's and we could still spend time together before I go to sleep." Mark couldn't deny that some of their best moments together had been after Amanda had seen Greg, but he was concerned. "That sounds nice, but I'm worried you'll be too tired by the time you get home. You've got another shift tonight." "No," Amanda insisted. "I still want to see you. I thought it'd just add something different if I saw Greg first, but don't worry. I'll tell him I can't make it if you want." Mark chuckled. "No, you're right. It's something different. Go see him, then make sure you're ready for me. I don't think it'll take long." "Sounds good," Amanda replied with a grin. "I bet I'll sleep so well after all this." Mark laughed. "Okay, go ahead. I'll hurry at Walker's and see you soon. Love you." "Love you too," she said. Amanda pulled into Greg's driveway just before 8 in the morning and sent a quick text to Mark before heading inside. "At Greg's, going in. See you soon. Love you." "Love you too. Have fun," Mark texted back. Smiling tiredly, Amanda walked up to the porch. As promised, the door was unlocked and she let herself in. "Greg?" she called. "In here," came his voice from the bedroom. Amanda was relieved they would get straight to the point. She was exhausted and didn't have much energy for small talk. The room was dim, and Amanda appreciated the dark curtains, feeling the weight of her fatigue. "Thanks for coming," Greg said from the bed. "I know you must be tired. I just didn't want to be alone this morning." Amanda paused for a moment, noticing something different in Greg's voice, a vulnerability she hadn't heard before. She wondered if something was troubling him. She quickly got ready, taking off her work scrubs dirty after a long shift and set them aside. She crawled up from the bottom of the bed, stopping with her face close to the man's lap. Looking up and making eye contact with him, she took a deep breath. He sighed in response, and his body began to react quickly. Greg smiled happily, running his fingers through her hair. As tired as she was, Amanda felt a stirring inside her. Even as she focused on him, she noticed her own body responding. After a minute, Greg gently guided her away, inviting Amanda to join him on the pillows. "You know," he said softly, "I tell you often how beautiful you are. That's true, of course." He paused, looking deeply into her eyes. "But I really should tell you just how lovely you are. You truly are a beautiful woman, Amanda." For the first time, Amanda felt completely taken aback. She struggled to find the right words, but Greg surprised her again by leaning in for a gentle kiss. Kissing wasn't new to Amanda. She had always thought of it as just part of being close to someone. She had often rolled her eyes at the idea that kissing was somehow more special than being with someone. But this kiss felt different. It was filled with emotion and meaning. This was not just a simple attraction. As Amanda felt a wave of feelings rush through her, part of her recognized the challenge in it. She felt a spark of energy surge through her. She gasped softly into Greg's mouth as he kissed her more deeply. For a moment, she responded eagerly, her heart racing as she felt drawn to him. The world around them seemed to disappear, leaving just the two of them in the way he made her feel. Briefly, she pulled away, turned her head, and ended the kiss. No, this was meant to be just fun, nothing more. Amanda drew a breath, about to speak, but then Greg's warm touch brought her back to the moment. The closeness between them took over, and she couldn't help but respond to the connection they shared. A soft cry escaped her as she became fully immersed in the moment. Being with Greg had always been different. He seemed to understand her in ways she didn't even understand herself. Their connection had a certain intensity that left her feeling overwhelmed, yet fully engaged, as if he knew exactly how to make her feel completely in tune with herself. Usually, he approached their time together with a certain forcefulness, but today felt different. Greg's approach was gentler, more deliberate. His every movement was slow and thoughtful, creating a sensation that was almost unfamiliar to Amanda. His touch left her feeling a warmth that spread through her, a sensation that grew stronger with every passing moment. It was as if they were in perfect sync, each movement and touch taking her a step closer to an unfamiliar but undeniable feeling of bliss. As he continued, the world outside seemed to fade away. Fatigue from her long work shifts and the usual stresses of life no longer mattered. In that moment, it wasn't about who they were or the arrangement they had. It was just about the closeness they shared. Amanda focused on the warmth of his touch, the gentle pressure that slowly built up within her, leaving her mind free of everything else. Greg's movements began to quicken, and Amanda felt herself respond instinctively. Her body moved in rhythm with his, her mind overwhelmed by the growing intensity of the experience. She didn't even realize the soft sounds escaping her, completely caught up in the moment. The room was filled with the sound of their breathing, their connection growing deeper with each passing second. For Amanda, time seemed to stand still as she lost herself in the experience, feeling nothing but the closeness and intensity of the moment they shared. Amanda had never really thought about what Greg would do next, trusting him completely after all their time together. But in that moment, she was too caught up in her own emotions and sensations to think clearly. Her focus was entirely on the intense feelings coursing through her, so she didn't consider the implications of what was happening. As Greg's movements subtly changed, something registered in the back of her mind. Amanda opened her eyes and saw a deep, emotional expression on Greg's face. It surprised her, a mix of vulnerability and something she couldn't quite understand. He looked at her with intensity and said softly, "Amanda, I love you." Before she could react, he leaned in and kissed her deeply, pouring all of his emotion into the moment. Amanda was overwhelmed, unable to respond, caught between the intensity of his words and the closeness they shared. In that moment, Amanda wished she had been more aware, that she had realized sooner what was happening. But she was too swept up in the experience to think about anything else. The emotions, the sensations, it was all too much. The overwhelming intensity was unlike anything she had felt before. As she realized what was happening, everything seemed to blur together, and she lost herself in the moment, her body reacting in ways that left her breathless. As they both came down from the intensity, Amanda found herself still holding on to Greg, their connection lingering. She slowly became aware of their closeness, both physically and emotionally, and realized how deeply she had been caught up in everything. The moment left her thoughtful, reflecting on the experience and the unexpected depth of emotion that had surfaced. The intensity of the moment, the vulnerability they both shared, was something that would stay with her long after. At some point, Amanda realized her legs were wrapped around Greg, holding him close. She stayed in the moment, overwhelmed by everything happening. Thoughts of what had just occurred flickered in her mind, but instead of feeling upset, she simply stayed there, quietly enjoying the closeness. Greg eventually pulled back, looking at her with a serious expression. "You're someone else's wife," he said in a low voice. "I know that. I don't want to hurt you or your family." He hesitated, then added, "But I love you. Thank you." Amanda was caught off guard by his confession. This wasn't typical for Greg, and never opened up like this. Unsure of how to respond, she felt her thoughts spinning. She knew she needed to get up, clean up, and head home, but she felt frozen in the moment. Before she could react, Greg kissed her again, and she felt him shift slightly. Amanda realized that despite everything, Greg wasn't done. She gave a soft sigh in response, and Greg smiled before leaning in closer, making her lose track of everything again. By the time Amanda arrived home, it was nearly 10 a.m. Mark had already prepared the bedroom with the sheets pulled back and the fan on for white noise. Exhausted after her third shift in a row, plus the long morning with Greg, Amanda felt drained as she climbed the stairs. Every movement seemed to take extra effort, and when she finally made it to the bedroom, Mark gently helped her out of her work clothes. As Mark undressed her, he noticed the lingering scent of Greg. It wasn't unusual for him to notice things like that, but this time it felt more intense. When her undergarments came off, there was an unmistakable scent in the air, and Mark's heart raced as Amanda settled into bed. "Amanda, what happened?" Mark asked softly. "You were supposed to come home a while ago. I thought it was going to be quick with Greg, and then you'd be back." Amanda looked tired, her eyes red. "I know, I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Things were different with Greg this morning. He was acting strange. I've never seen him like that before." She paused, searching for the right words, and Mark waited patiently for her to continue. Amanda took a deep breath, her voice flat as she said, "He told me he loved me. He's never said anything like that before. I think he might have been drinking. And he didn't stop. He didn't use protection." Mark felt his heart race as the reality sank in. "Amanda!" he exclaimed. "You're not on birth control right now. What were you thinking?" She sounded exhausted as she replied, "I don't know. I'm so used to just going along with it. He's always been careful before, but I wasn't thinking. I'm really sorry. I was just so tired." Mark's throat felt dry. "Your cycle ended 2 weeks ago. This could be a really bad time. What if you end up pregnant?" "Please don't be upset," Amanda pleaded. "My cycle's been off because of the ring. It'll be fine. It was just once." She hesitated. "Actually, twice." "Twice?" Mark couldn't believe it. "What were you thinking?" "I'm sorry," Amanda said softly. "I didn't know it would happen the first time, and then I just thought it wouldn't matter after that." Mark shook his head, trying to stay calm. "That's so risky. What if you are pregnant?" "I'm so sorry," Amanda cried. "We'll figure it out together. Please, I'm just so tired. I have to get up with the kids in a few hours. Can we talk about this later?" Mark sighed, realizing how exhausted she was. At that moment, Amanda seemed to notice him, and despite the tension between them, she noticed how tense he was. "Oh, baby, I promised we'd spend time together, but I'm so tired. I know you want to, but I need sleep. Maybe we can be together tonight before work. I'm really sorry, but I need rest." Mark nodded, his heart still heavy with worry but not wanting to pressure her. "Of course. Sleep now," he said. "I need to get back to work anyway." As Mark lay next to her, trying to calm his thoughts, he found it hard to ignore the emotions running through him. Despite the situation, he couldn't stop thinking about everything they'd discussed. He took a deep breath, trying to focus as Amanda quickly drifted into sleep. Still processing everything, Mark quietly got up, his mind racing. As he moved across the room, he noticed Amanda's discarded clothing and couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by everything that had happened. He found her underwear and noticed they were damp. He laid down next to the bed, his mind racing with images of his wife with someone else. He thought about her belly growing round and full, carrying another man's child, and how her body would change to nurture that baby. The mix of thoughts and feelings made him feel overwhelmed. After a while, he looked at the bed. His lovely wife was asleep, her mouth partly open. He decided to get dressed and go back to work. 4 weeks passed since her visit with Greg, and Amanda's period still hadn't arrived. At 3 weeks, she tried to reassure herself. saying her body might still be adjusting. She reminded herself that her first period after stopping the birth control had come 2 weeks later and lasted longer than usual. By the 4th week, she began to feel dizzy and crampy, which made her anxious. When she took a home pregnancy test, she couldn't believe her eyes when a second pink line appeared almost immediately. Amanda thought of ways to convince herself that the baby might still be Mark's. After all, he had been careful. But deep down, she knew Greg had inseminated her on the days when she was most likely to conceive. There was no denying Amanda was pregnant, and she also knew who the father was. It wasn't her husband. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to Infidelity Plus to stay updated with more captivating tales of infidelity and payback. Turn on notifications so you're the first to see our latest content.